Welcome to the fourth episode of STOKR Insights. Today is 26th of April and you are with Tobias and Arnab on the weekly web podcast that we do here. Welcome, Tobias. Glad to have you again.
Hi, Arnab. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Good to see you. So for the audience, we have these episodes are usually divided into two parts. The part A, we talk about the recent developments in the crypto and finance industry. And the part B, we talk about asset tokenization and interesting element of the real world tokenization of assets, right? For the part A, today there are some interesting developments that we saw last week. One is a launch of stablecoin in Europe. The second is the Mica, that is the crypto assets regulation and what is the status of that. And the third, there are some few other elements of the financial markets that Tobias would like to highlight. And the second part, we will talk about the last discussion that we started about securitization vehicle and why it is an interesting vehicle to look into it if you are thinking of asset tokenization in Europe. So Tobias, I think this is very interesting. In the last week, which we heard, is a Societe Generale Forge. It's a group of, I think it's a subsidiary of Societe Generale, the major giant in European market. They launched a convertible euro. I think this is very interesting because we have heard in the crypto market the concept of stablecoin like Tether, like DAI, like USDC. The convertible euro seems to be the same. It just calls convertible rather than it calls, in that case, a stablecoin, right? Because it's
What is Forge? What is Forge, Arnab? Maybe you can explain a little bit, like what is the background of that? So not many people heard about Forge yet, even if they're pretty active, I think, in the space, and they're a daughter, I think, of Societe Generale. Maybe you can explain a little bit. What is the stablecoin about here in this sense? Because I only know Tether and then a little bit CBDC projects, but maybe you can highlight what is like the idea about that.
So if we know the history of stablecoins, primarily the stablecoins are issued in a USD denominated primarily, right? It's not so much active in the euro market, though there are some euro stable coins, but the volume is not that great. And most of the stable coins are issued as a crypto assets, which is primarily used in the crypto infrastructure. What interesting happened, as you mentioned, the Forge, it's a digital asset arm of Societe Generale. That's what I understand. They are quite active in the market. They were actually also active in MakerDAO infrastructure. So they are also participating in DeFi for certain activities. And they launched this convertible euro, which is also a stable coin, but the stable to euro value. And that means it's 1-to-1 backed by euro in that sense, which is issued. And this is interestingly issued. It's issued as a crypto asset. In their press release that they mentioned, it's issued as a crypto asset. It's issued on a permissionless blockchain, that is Ethereum. So it's issued as an ERC20 token. They have already announced a smart contract and they have already shared the link in the press release. And this stable coin will be primarily used by capital market participants. That's what I think in the press release they mentioned. One interesting difference is to understand here, like when you trade Tether, I can send you Tether, and if you have a wallet like Tron wallet, Ethereum wallet, Liquid wallet, any wallet, you can hold the Tether without doing a KYC with Tether. In this convertible euro, what Societe Generale did, that if you're receiving those or you're trading those stable coin or the convertible euro issued by Forge here, the recipient and sender need to be whitelisted, which is something similar what happens in the securities world. What STOKR is doing also in the security space is securities can be only traded between identified individual. The same thing I think Forge is doing over here in case of their euro convertible stable coin. These are different from CBDCs, I understand, because CBDCs are definitely issued by a government entity. This is a private entity, so that's, I think, a fundamental difference. But it has some definitely interesting impact in the market. We will see in the next years, I would say.
I have just like, I'm just here on Etherscan. I will share my screen. I don't know whether you can see it.
Yes, I can see, yeah.
So here we see like, this is like the euro convertible token, right? Of Forge.
Yes. Yeah.
So we see here we have like around like 10 million. At least that's what they say, but probably they have access. and currently there are 2 transfers and 1 holder, so nothing happened so far so much. But you see a big impact here, right, on the markets. This is like a very useful initiative, right? Because for me, it's always hard to grasp whether this will ever take off, or anybody is using this kind of things. So, what are the use cases, and where do you think this can be really interesting?
I think the first, definitely, I understand. I think a lot of people are also putting some critical remarks on this, because first of all, the entire idea of decentralization goes away in the way when you're doing permission structures and all these elements, KYC and all these things. But I think what fundamental value where I see is Societe Generale is not a small name, and Forge is a wholly owned subsidiary. So the Societe Generale group has definitely, I would say, some say and reputation involved in that. And for them to issue a crypto assets on a permissionless architecture like Ethereum and sharing the smart contract address is a big deal. It may not look very big from the crypto audience in specific, but from the TradeFi people or from the people who already understand a little bit of the capital markets or financial market, they know how much time it takes for the technological adoption in whether TradeFi people or the existing financial institutions. So from that, it's a very big achievement, I would say, a very big move. The other thing, which is much more in a deeper way, where I would like to go and where I would like to highlight is in Europe, there is a pilot regime coming. The pilot regime is a regulatory environment where crypto assets that are qualified as securities and how they will be traded and settled. So that's the pilot regime scope, which is also kind of a sister, I would say, law that passed along with the MiCAR, the market in crypto assets regulation.
Last week.
Exactly. And in that case, what happens is in the pilot regime, the tokens or security tokens need to be traded and settled. And to do that, if your securities are on chain, you need a payment currency also on chain. So you need both the crypto assets on chain and you need a payment currency on chain. The moment you have both, you can have delivery versus settlement at the same time. Maybe, and this is, I think, and I'm assuming in a lot of this regulated DLT market infrastructure under the pilot regime, they may not be allowed to use the stable coins that are USDC or USDT, and also it happens to be a US dollar denominated stable coin. So in that case, maybe Forge is already creating the brace Lego work by bringing this stable coin, which can actually act as a payment layer on chain, and then the security is on chain, and then the DVP can happen on chain.
So it's a missing puzzle. Yeah. So it's a missing puzzle here. What we need for really like securities trading, and also on chain. So you have like also like a digital counterparty to your securities, which people let's say trust here in this sense, because they also have like a segregated entity as far as I can see, where they store the euros somehow, so you can verify at all times that actually these euros which are pegged are there. So an interesting project. And in fact, you mentioned already, like the Mica has been voted, and we finally have it, and we're super happy. I'll be super happy, Arnab. We have been both involved in also this whole long drafting process when you have been chairman at Inadbar, and I've been drafting overnight certain passages, and I think we did a pretty good job, especially also as a small outset to influence like these kind of laws and regulations from the European Union. But what do you think now? What's happening next? Is this really like a big move here?
Yes, I think it was kind of Tobias. I think you will remember that we saw the entire consultation process to start with the commission and everything, and then it was DG FISMAN, all these interesting regulatory bodies were involved, legislative bodies were involved, and then the framework came in, and then we had a number of comments on their drafts, and in different sessions we were involved. And also as a finance working group chair at Inadba, I was for I think more than 2 years over there. It was a real pleasure, and it was a very honorable, I would say it was honor for me to really do certain, I would say, work that shaped the Mica. Though I think one thing which I still think is kind of it's good to have. I will not say it's a bad piece of law or it's something which the market should not welcome, but definitely is definitely a scope to do some more on this. And I think one element I want to really highlight is the Mica was always focusing as a tech neutral. This is what tech neutrality is one of the core element of the entire legislative discussions. And this is, I think, the industry players were also kind of pushing for it, this tech neutrality. And that's what came in, is a proof of work is better than proof of stake, or proof of stake is better than proof of work. All these elements, I think, was kind of dealt with in a very nice way. But one thing which I would say is a missed opportunity is the privacy focused coins like Monero and Zcash. These kind of coins have been kind of restricted under Mica. And impact is, if you are an exchange in Europe and you're regulated under the Mica environment, you are not allowed to list and privacy focused coins, and the entire privacy focused coins, the main purpose was anonymity, right? And this is a fundamental human right. So certain way, I think that got a little bit affected. But overall, I would say, if I compare to US, this is very interesting, is in US where they're still fighting, and I think, Tobias, you have a better opinion on this. I think Europe did definitely a great job in this, at least to create some certainty in the space.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I have heard now Coinbase is suing like the SEC, so they are both fighting, and I think they also think about moving out of US. But we have touched upon this also last time. But this is like a continuous process. I think we see and hear Europe is Mica, but also with the pilot regime. I think at least we have like a regulatory outset, and we know what securities are. We know what utility tokens are, we know what e-money is, and all this kind of stuff. We have a very good understanding of the regulatory framework, but I think now the question is how the regulator will enact these kind of pieces, because we know from the past, from crowdfunding, but also like even from alternative investment fund managers, and everybody is shouting hooray, yeah, we have now a specific outset, and we are all streamlined now Europe, and we know all the rules. The question is what the regulator will do when the projects file their white papers, but because there are indeed, and we have discussed at that time, also there are indeed possibilities, obviously, for regulators to block any type of projects, any moment of time, right? Even if these are only registration processes. So the question is then obviously, is there like a quality or a kind of idea at the regulator say, okay, I like this project, I don't like this project so much, and I will block it. And this can be also obviously abused by ideology purposes. So we will see how it is developing, but I think it's pretty good that we have something, and there we are. That we definitely leapfrogged the United States, right? I think it's very cool.
And it's interesting, Tobias, as you mentioned, like Coinbase is suing, but Coinbase is also moving offshore. And this is very interesting news that they're now trying to go outside of US to get also license, where Coinbase was one of the entity that was constantly criticizing other entities who are working outside of US, as criticizing them, hey, you're trying to avoid laws and you're going to offshore. Now the question is, somebody's offshore is somebody's onshore, right? That's for sure, right? If you are
exactly.
sitting in, like, this is very interesting, like offshore for whom and onshore for whom. And it will be very interesting. And in this case, I think Mica definitely provides edge over for the European companies, and this, I think, will be an interesting observation how the market evolves in Europe.
Yeah, and Brian, I think Brian, he's still onshore in California, right? No, bad joke, but but I think he was always like a super defender of the US, and at one point of time maybe he realizes it's not so cool, at least at the moment of time.
Yeah.
So let's move on. I think we have discussed these kind of topics. I think like one remark what I have also seen this morning, and I think it's also like in the line of what we have talked in the last episodes. And here we see like First Republic, a bank is falling again. I think I have checked like these charts, and I think that since they're high in 2021, they lost until last week 95% of market value, and now overnight again 50%. It's always funny, like to see that when you have lost 95%, that you can still lose 50%, right? and you can actually still lose 99%. and then you can lose again 99%. So that's simple math. People always forget it, but when you see like these kind of charts, and I think also like some Bitcoin maximalists and crypto people have abused also like these kind of developments at banks. The volatility can be extremely strong, and you can also lose like your money when you want to invest into legacy investments. And I think I found this interesting. But the story is still going on. The topics around why they have problems are the same. So they have a lot of outflows of deposits. And as we know, it's totally sufficient to attack a bank with 10%. So when 10% take out the money, the bank is more or less bankrupt, right? I think in Bitcoin we have like the 50% attack, so you can see also a little bit of a buffer. That's my 2 cents to this topic.
I think you're talking about First Republic, right?
Yes, First Republic, yeah.
I'm also interested to see, because I don't know whether you have noticed, there was one Twitter personality, Balaji. I think he was he's quite active in the crypto space. He was a CTO of Coinbase, and I think he was quite vocal, and in the VC cycle he became quite prominent also in that sense. And he said he is betting that Bitcoin will reach 1 million within, I think, by June or something like that. And he's expecting there are a lot of these mid-sized banks will fall. I think it was kind of still a very big marketing effort and the marketing activity rather than reality. But yeah, I don't know what objective Bitcoin is reaching to 1 million. I have nothing to say against it. But definitely, I think it's maybe a far-fetched. But I definitely agree, the small, mid-sized banks are getting more, I would say, kind of under the threat. And definitely when the people things in the market, your mid-sized banks are shaky, you move assets to bigger banks, right? And this actually shakes the bank's treasury and the capital requirements and all these activities. And the main bank's activities is the revenue based on the loans and all these things. And the depositors move away, they don't have money technically. It's an interesting situation. And then we will see all the spiral downtrend and bank run and those things. But it's interesting. It's interesting to see like how many banks fall in which months. And
yes, and
it's not
we see, yeah, we will see maybe like further banks falling. And I think like now on today's date, they also talk about a potential default of the US. They always talk about this because they have like their own money problems. But what you can see right now is like that the spread is pretty high between short-term and long-term treasuries. And I think it's an interesting development, and we don't know what will happen next week. And the markets are very, very flat, right? I've never seen almost like markets. I think the last time there have been so less volatility was 2017. So we have like very flat markets. Everybody is maybe it's like the calm before the storm, right? Or whatever will happen. But it's a pretty interesting time.
Good. So I think we can move to our second part of the episode, part B, about tokenization and securitization and asset tokenization element. So I think, Tobias, we had a very nice conversation in the last week where we were discussing about one interesting choice of vehicle is Luxembourg securitization vehicle. And you're mentioning about how it's different than traditional form of companies, which people know, private limited companies, partnerships, and those things. And I think coming from that conversation, maybe we can go to the in-depth discussion again. And I think one important point, maybe that's connected to that also, like when you mentioned about securitization, you're securitizing some kind of risks, right? Or I don't know, maybe can you securitize an asset? So maybe it would be good to give a maybe color on that. What kind of assets or what kind of rights or what kind of liabilities that you can securitize? So what you can technically securitize at the end of the day?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very relevant question. So originally, securitization started mainly with securitizing debt instruments. So they put into like a sort of a portfolio together different claims of banks or other entities against individuals or corporates, and they package them, and then they said, okay, there is like there are different risks aligned to this. We have seen this in 2008. The whole securitization market was turned down overnight, and it actually came like almost like to a halt. While I've seen like in Europe at least the securitization vehicle assets under management are still like at 200 billion. So I think like that was the original idea to make a risk transfer from the person who is actually lending to borrowers, right? And so it gets like off his balance sheet, like all these this kind of this also claims which we cannot verify whether they are really enforceable, and package it in a securitization structure. But the securitization structure is also available for all other asset classes, and in Luxembourg there's almost no limit to it as long as you use like the securitization structure according with Luxembourg securitization law, which basically means that you don't have like a lot of management. That's what I explained the last time. So you really know what kind of assets you buy in. And let's talk about assets. I think here we have like definitely a real estate is in assets which you can put into a securitization structure by securitizing actually the rental income and potentially the sale proceeds. Music rights you can tokenize. You can any cash flow in the end you can think of tokenizing. We, as you know, Arnab, at STOKR, we have at one point also tokenized like a hash rate contract and put it like into securitization vehicle. So we have like securitized the hash rate contract and then issued with a securitization vehicle the notes in tokenized forms to the investors. So there are no limits in this sense to what you can put as an asset into a securitization vehicle. I think what important to know is still that you cannot just like give a loan to like an operating company and then you say, okay, this loan is then linked to such an operating company, because then in the end you would not create like a specific claim on an asset for an investor, but you would still like be like kept up in all the assets and liabilities of a specific operating company. So you need sort of like at least as a counterparty a sort of remote vehicle where you pack your assets in. I think that's a very important part of the securitization structures.
So in that case, like what you mentioned, maybe just quickly 2 steps back, you mentioned that you can bring any kind of financial rights, if I may understand, connected to an asset. It can be a financial right of the rent connected to a real estate. It can be financial rights of the royalty connected to an IP, right? But can you also bring the self under the securitization vehicle?
Yeah,
like for example, a real estate itself under securitization vehicle, or a company shares under a securitization vehicle.
I think the question is here, you can bring definitely because like in the end, what you do is like you create a vehicle which is dedicated to a specific asset, right? So when you say, okay, I want to tokenize or securitize real estate, right? You would enter normally into a sort of a contract where you say, okay, how do this rental income cash flows come like to the securitization vehicle, and this is like then the asset itself. And this can then be collateralized, for example, itself by a lien to the real estate. And just packing assets in a securitization vehicle, yes, when you consider like these assets are like these kind of products which are creating cash flows, but just like putting something there where there's no cash flow, it's problematic. And the reason why it is problematic is because like the securitization vehicle itself should not do own management, so it cannot produce its own fruits, right? So somehow you have like to link the fruits to a third party. So when you have an asset like a real estate, there is like the rental income, right? But when I pack now everything under my securitization structure, then I don't have this differentiation anymore, and then the idea of securitization goes away, because in the end, the securitization vehicle will be like then a property manager, an asset manager itself, right? And then the purpose of securitization to have like a sort of a risk transfer from the originator to the asset holders who are investing in the securitization vehicle would not be there anymore. I don't know whether that's clear.
Yeah, I think to a certain extent, I think definitely it's a very advanced topic, and this session we are anyways doing a little bit more medium to advanced. And if the audience, if you feel that this part is not clear yet, please feel free to write in the comments. We may go much more deeper into the conversation because these are topics at a much more advanced level, but we try to break it down as much as possible. Maybe I think before we end this episode, I have one last question to Tobias on this point. Um, you mentioned about bringing this asset under securitization vehicle, and what we see in the crypto industry with the bankruptcy of Celsius, FTX, and all this kind of, let's call it, bigger names in the crypto space, which spend millions, if not billions, in a lot of marketing activities over 2021, 22 in the COVID post-COVID time, or in the COVID time technically. And there is always definitely a lot of questions. A lot of people, investors have fear that, hey, I'm investing in a vehicle. What happens if this management company of the securitization vehicles goes bust, right? Because this management company is not the main company whom I know and I'm investing, right? How do you think this kind of fear can be, like this kind of protection can be given to such investors of the securitization vehicle? Is it already in-baked, or you need to do some different structuring for that?
Yeah, I think like this is a very relevant question, right? And the securitization specialists, they talk about this in the context of remoteness and limited recourse obligations. So these are like two big words. But what it in the end, what it basically means is that like other third parties cannot really attack the vehicle itself because of liabilities who are coming from the past of the originator who is transferring the assets to the securitization vehicle. So let's say you have a music manager, right? And he has like a lot of rights, and he's transferring these rights into a securitization structure. And then he did like a lot of like, and then he tweeted like something about one of their musicians, and there are like charges against this entity. As soon as like there is a transfer, they are segregated from his assets, right? So when there's a lawsuit against a specific manager for whatever management faults he has done or whatever he has said on Twitter, these will not be impacted. So the investors have like a specific right to get only like the fruits and benefits out of like this concrete compartment, this complete vehicle which was created for securitization purposes. So it's segregated, right? And it's totally remote. It doesn't affect other vehicles when it goes bankrupt, but it is also not affected by other claims. So when you structure it right, the securitization vehicle, you really know what you're buying into, and you know also like very well your counterparty. That's, by the way, because you mentioned Celsius and FTX and maybe even like Silicon Valley Bank. Because in the traditional system, you don't know always like your counterparty, right? So you can put like your security somewhere into a bank, and then maybe you're not like the owner of the shares, right? And somebody else is like a nominee is doing this part for you. And when the bank is going bankrupt and you want to have your shares again, you have first like to find out who's actually officially owning it, because it's not me. So this kind of knowing what you invest into is very important, I think.
No, I think it's
and that's one of the main benefits I would also say about the securitization structure, because that's like the easiest way to build this, and also like to not to be affected by managerial mismanagement in general and other liabilities of operating companies, right? A bank is also operating company.
Yeah. No, I think it makes sense, because this is what happened with Celsius and FTX. When a depositor is depositing, they did not invest into the company's equity, so they don't care about the business of the company, right? But it's apparently.
Gesundheit.
Thank you. No, I think it's an interesting aspect, like, because this is what really shook the market, because the best practices were thrown out in the dustbin, right? But I think we covered enough points for this day. And thank you, Tobias. Thanks for sharing the insights.
Thank you, Arnab, sharing your insights.
Thanks a lot. And thanks to the audience for listening. And for the audience also, we always have the request, if you have any feedback, how we can improve, what kind of contents we should bring more, please feel free to write in the comment sections. It will be really helpful for us to take this thing forward. And also share, this videos if you think that's insightful for you. And see you next week. And signing off for the day. Take care.
Bye-bye.